Welcome to DIYEasyCrafts.com. Today we're going to take a look at how to repair a water-damaged drywall ceiling. Now this is the damaged area that I'm talking about. This was below an upstairs bathroom. The toilet tank overflowed. The fill tank overflowed. It wasn't wet for that long, just a day or so, but I figured I'd do the repair myself and save a few $100s in the process. This is what you're going to need: some spackling paste, a handheld sander. I like it with the screen instead of sandpaper, and a couple of putty knives. If you're going to use one of the larger putty knives or spackle blades, 12 or 14 inch, you also need a little container that you can scoop the spackle out, and then also a drop cloth. Now, I am not an expert at drywall repair, but I did want to show that almost any homeowner can tackle a job like this themselves and save some money in the process. The first step is just to remove all of the damaged paint and spackle. If the water damage was over a long period of time, you may even have to replace a piece of the sheetrock. Fortunately, I didn't for this repair. I just had to kind of scrape off all of the paint that was no longer attached to the sheetrock and get rid of all the soft areas. Then I used that handheld sander just real quick, just to go over all of the edges. I used some tape, some spackle tape, applied those to the seams, the joint in between each sheet of sheetrock. And then I started the spackle. I pushed the spackle in and through the mesh of the tape, and then started to fill in all of the voids. I used a bigger knife and tried to do my best to smooth it all out. You see these guys that are professionals and they can really do this in one or two pulls of that blade. I'm not that guy. I attack this in small increments. I did a little bit, let it dry, sanded it off, put a little bit more, etc. But the end result was pretty good. This was my first laying on of the spackle. You can see it's very rough, but don't worry, there is an end in sight. There's a couple different ways of sanding the spackle. You can actually do it with a wet sponge, or in this case I'm using a scrunchie from the kitchen. You can only use this really on high spots, obvious high spots, and it's really good to kind of merge the new spackle so that it meets up perfectly with the existing ceiling, so that you break that any edge. You don't want to sand with a wet cloth over the entire project, because you'll never end up with a flat area. You're definitely going to need to do a little bit of sanding, but a wet cloth or a wet sponge, really nice option for the whole edge, and it doesn't create any dust. So the next step is to sand the main area. And for that, you can use, or I used, a handheld sander. I've used electric sanders in the past, and they just make a tremendous amount of dust. This handheld sander, especially with the screen, removes material pretty quickly, and most of the dust, when you tip that screen over, drops straight down onto the tarp. So it's not as big of a mess. If you've got some real high areas, you can tilt that handheld sander on an edge and use two hands to put some power behind it. But again, you could, you have to be careful. You could definitely dig a groove with that. The goal is to get everything flat and level and fill in all these little imperfections. So I let it dry completely. Then I sanded it, and then I went back and I looked for any imperfections. If an area had to be sanded, I would sand it. If it needed to be filled in, I just fill it in with another layer of the spackle. When I had the other layer done, walk away from it again and let it dry. In my case, this is just a home repair, so I just let it dry overnight. Then I went back and resanded. For the entire project, I probably was done over the course of 3 days. Once again, I'm using that wet cloth. really just to break that edge between the new spackle and the existing ceiling. And then the final step, I have to let it dry from using the wet cloth, but then I just applied some sealing white paint with a roller, and I didn't use a sharp edge for the borders of the paint. I kind of made it as light as possible. Once that dries, you can barely tell the area was repaired. So this is the area after the repair. It may not be 100% perfect, but to my eye it is. And it didn't cost me that much, just a little bit of spackle and some time. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, I ask that you please give it a thumbs up and subscribe to this YouTube channel. By all means, check us out on the web at DIYEasyCrafts.com. I've got a variety of do-it-yourself crafts and projects for the homeowner. Thank you very much for watching.